The silver moonlight bathed the barren landscape of Caldera, its fractured surface gleaming faintly, like the last embers of a dying star. Once a thriving moon kingdom, Caldera was now a ghost of its former glory, crumbling under the weight of its inevitable demise. The air was thin, the gravity weak, and the inhabitants struggled to survive. A sense of dread permeated the very atmosphere, like an old forgotten legend told to those who dared to remember. I was one of the last off-worlders who came to this forsaken place. A researcher, a wanderer really, who had been hired by the kingdom's remaining nobility to study the bizarre celestial anomaly that had plunged the moon into an irreversible decline. But as the months passed, I learned more about the dying kingdom than I could have ever anticipated. I learned about its ruler, Queen Elyana. She wasn't always a queen. In fact, Elyana had once been a rebellious princess, exiled from the palace when she was a teenager for reasons no one would speak of. She had returned to power after a bloody uprising had shattered the kingdom's ruling class. Now, she wore the crown as a symbol of both her triumph and the weight of the kingdom's collapse. Elyana was beautiful, but her beauty was marred by sorrow and duty. Her eyes were a haunting shade of silver, like the moon's light reflected in the deep ocean, and her hair, once a rich chestnut, was now streaked with strands of gray. Time had not been kind to her, but it had forged a sharpness in her, a sense of purpose that held the remnants of the kingdom together. She ruled a dying world, and yet she never wavered. That night, I sat across from her in the grand hall of the palace, a place that had once hosted lavish balls and celebrations, but now stood eerily silent. The walls, once adorned with intricate tapestries, were now cracked and peeling. The air smelled of dust, decay, and faint traces of something more ancient, something darker. She studied me with a gaze that could pierce through the thin veil of my thoughts. There was something unsettling about her presence, something that made me feel both like an intruder and a confidant. After all, I was the only one who had stayed this long. The rest of her court had long since abandoned her. "Do you ever wonder what it's like to watch everything you've known crumble to dust?" she asked softly, her voice a mixture of weariness and quiet strength. I met her gaze, unsure of how to respond. It was a question I had asked myself many times in the last few months, as I watched the kingdom's decline accelerate. The once thriving cities had fallen silent, their people scattered to the farthest corners of the universe. The moon's atmosphere had been ravaged by a series of cataclysmic events. A mysterious energy field had destabilized its orbit, and now, the very soil beneath our feet seemed to shudder with every passing moment. "I don't know," I said finally, my voice hesitant. "But I do know that it's not easy living like this." Elyana nodded, as if she had been expecting my answer. She stood and walked toward the window, her silhouette framed by the dim light of the dying moon. For a moment she was still, her gaze lost in the distant horizon, where the great rifts in the moon's surface seemed to bleed molten light into the void. "I've spent my life trying to save this place," she continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "But no matter what I do, it's never enough. The kingdom is dying and I can feel it. Every day, every breath. It's suffocating me." I watched her carefully, not knowing what to say. She had never spoken of her burdens so openly before. The weight of leadership, the responsibility of a dying kingdom, was something that no one could truly understand unless they had lived it. "Why do you keep trying?" finally asked. "Why not just let it go?" Her eyes flickered toward me, a flash of pain crossing her features before it was quickly concealed. "Because I can't," she said, her voice trembling for the first time. "I made a promise to my people, even if they've long since abandoned me. I made a promise to them, and I intend to keep it, even if it means my own destruction." For a long moment we stood in silence, The only sound the soft hum of the palace's failing energy systems. The room felt colder now, the air thicker with the weight of her words. I felt a strange compulsion to reach out to her, to offer some form of comfort, but I knew that it would never be enough. Her pain was deeper than any simple gesture could heal. "Will you stay?" she asked suddenly, turning toward me with an intensity that caught me off guard. "Will you stay until the end?" Her question hung in the air, and for the first time since arriving on Caldera, I found myself at a loss for words. Stay. What did that even mean? Stay to witness the fall of a kingdom. To watch her die alongside her people, trapped in a decaying world. I don't know, I stammered, my mind racing for an answer. "I've only been here to study. I didn't expect any of this." Elyana's expression softened, and for a brief moment, I saw a glimmer of vulnerability in her eyes. "I'm not asking you to save us," she said quietly. "I know that's impossible. But I need someone to stay, to bear witness to what's happening. To remember that Caldera was once something beautiful. That it meant something." I felt a knot tighten in my chest, a sense of helplessness that mirrored the hopelessness in her voice. How could I stay? How could anyone bear the weight of witnessing the death of an entire world? But in that moment, I realized that it wasn't just the kingdom that was dying. It was her. Elyana was a ruler of a dying moon, yes, but she was also a woman facing her own inevitable end. And perhaps, in some strange way, we were both searching for meaning in the ruins of what had once been. "I'll stay," I said finally, my voice steady but filled with a deep sorrow. "I'll stay as long as you need me." Elyana nodded, her lips curling into a small, sad smile. "Thank you," she whispered, and I saw in her eyes that, for the first time in a long while, she believed that she was not entirely alone. As the night wore on, the weight of her words lingered in the air between us. The moon outside grew darker, its light fading as the rifts in the surface cracked wider, the tremors of death reverberating through the kingdom. But in that moment it didn't matter. For the first time, Elyana had found someone who would stay. Until the very end.